May 15, 2024 was a radiant spring day in Lisbon when a wedding took place in the small chapel of São Vicente de Fora that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. Amina Ben Ali, a 28-year-old software developer from Casablanca, stood in an elegant cream-colored dress next to her Portuguese fiancé Ricardo Santos, a 35-year-old lawyer from a respected Lisbon family. The chapel was decorated with white roses. About 60 guests were present, mainly Ricardo's family and colleagues. Amina's own family from Morocco had been unable to make the long journey, which simultaneously saddened and relieved her. Ricardo presented himself as the perfect groom. In his tailored dark blue suit, he looked like a man who could hardly believe his luck. "What a beautiful couple," whispered his Aunt Maria. "Amina is so exotic and elegant." Amina herself was undoubtedly impressive. Her dark eyes radiated happiness and her long black hair was artfully braided with white flowers. The dress was an heirloom from her deceased grandmother. She spoke fluent Portuguese with a charming accent. They had met 2 years earlier when Amina came to Lisbon to work for a fintech startup. She lived in Príncipe Real, a multicultural neighborhood. Ricardo worked for a prestigious law firm. His family belonged to Lisbon's upper middle class. The encounter was like something from a romantic film. They met in a cafe in Bairro Alto where Amina was working on her laptop. When it crashed, Ricardo offered his help. While he helped her, a conversation developed about technology and cultures. After 6 months, Amina moved into Ricardo's apartment in Chiado. His family received her with Portuguese politeness and restraint. Isabel, his mother, was cautious. "We know so little about her family." Antonio was more pragmatic. "If Ricardo is happy, that's the main thing." The relationship seemed harmonious. Ricardo was proud to introduce Amina. She was considered an enrichment, a modern Moroccan woman who fit perfectly into Lisbon's cosmopolitan atmosphere. She cooked Moroccan dishes and told fascinating stories about Casablanca. Amina flourished in her new role. In Morocco, she had lived in a conservative family where certain aspects of her identity had never been discussed. Lisbon offered her a freedom she had never known. When Ricardo proposed to her after a year at sunset on the Ponte 25 de Abril, Amina said yes through tears. Ricardo had insisted on a grand ceremony. "My family expects it, and you deserve the best." On the wedding day, everything went smoothly. Father Miguel celebrated a moving ceremony about love that transcends borders. Ricardo spoke his vows. "Amina, you have changed my life." Amina replied tremblingly, "With you, I finally feel at home." The celebration took place in a restaurant in Belém. The menu mixed Portuguese cuisine with Moroccan spices. Only Lara Mendes, Amina's colleague and only close friend, observed with mixed feelings. As an experienced developer and lesbian, she knew the complexity of identity. "You look nervous," whispered Lara. Amina smiled. "It's just exciting. A new chapter." After the ceremony, they drove to the Hotel Tivoli Oriente. In the suite, Ricardo opened champagne while Amina enjoyed the view over Lisbon. "To us," said Ricardo. "To our future." Amina returned his kiss, but her heart beat faster. There was something Ricardo didn't know, something fundamental about her. In Casablanca, she had lived under the name Amin. The transition had been a painful process that had led her to Europe. In Portugal, Amina Ben Ali existed legally and completely. Amin belonged to the past. She had hoped that this past would stay there. But in this luxurious suite, she felt growing unrest. Ricardo noticed her thoughtfulness. "What are you thinking about?" "About us," she lied. "About our new life." Deep in her heart, she knew that this life stood on uncertain foundations. While Lisbon slept, she didn't suspect that this night would change everything. The morning after the wedding broke with gentle sunlight through the heavy curtains of the hotel suite. Amina awoke restlessly next to her sleeping husband. Ricardo lay with a possessive arm around her waist. The past night had been complicated. She had skillfully avoided any intimate situation and convinced Ricardo that she was exhausted after the long wedding day. He had shown understanding, but she felt his growing impatience. "Good morning, my wife," murmured Ricardo when he noticed her movements. The word wife sounded possessive in his mouth, less like a declaration of love than like a claim of ownership. He kissed her neck and Amina instinctively tensed. "Good morning, my husband," she replied, trying to hide her nervousness. She got up and went to the window to enjoy the view over Lisbon. The city was slowly awakening. Traffic on Avenida da Liberdade was intensifying. Ricardo watched her from the bed. "You were very reserved last night," he said carefully. "Is everything all right?" I thought newlyweds would... Amina turned around and gave him her most beautiful smile. I was just overwhelmed by all the excitement. Today I feel much better. After an extensive breakfast at the hotel, they returned to their shared apartment in Chiado. Ricardo had prepared a small surprise. A sign, "Welcome home, Señora Santos," hung on the door. Amina was touched by the gesture, although her new name sounded strange. In the following weeks, a new routine was established. Ricardo was proud to present his exotic wife to his colleagues and friends. At dinners and receptions, he loved to introduce her. "This is my wife Amina. She comes from Morocco and is a brilliant software developer." Amina smiled politely and played her role perfectly. But Ricardo began to show his possessive claim more and more clearly. He was interested in her working hours, wanted to know whom she met and what they talked about. "I worry about you," he said when she questioned his controlling behavior. "Lisbon can be dangerous for a beautiful woman." 3 weeks after the wedding, Ricardo came home earlier than expected. He found Amina on the phone, absorbed in a conversation that she immediately broke off when she noticed him. "Who were you talking to?" he asked, setting down his briefcase. "With Lara from work," Amina replied quickly. "We were talking about a project." Ricardo frowned. "That didn't sound like work. You spoke very emotionally." Amina felt her stomach tighten. She had actually been speaking with Dr. Helena Rodriguez, her endocrinologist who monitored her hormone treatment, an appointment she had postponed since the wedding, afraid of Ricardo's questions. "Lara is going through a difficult time," Amina lied. "I was trying to comfort her." Ricardo looked at her skeptically but said nothing. Instead, he took her in his arms and kissed her passionately. "I want you all to myself," he murmured. "No secrets between us." This night became the first great test. Ricardo was determined to consummate their marriage, and Amina could no longer evade. In the darkness of their bedroom, she had to summon all her acting skills. Over the years, she had perfected the art of hiding her physical differences. But Ricardo wasn't just anyone. He was her husband, who believed he had the right to know every inch of her body. The next morning, Ricardo was unusually silent. At breakfast, he observed her with an expression Amina couldn't interpret. "Amina," he finally said, "is there something you haven't told me?" Her heart began to race. "What do you mean?" "About your past, your family in Morocco. You never talk about them." Amina sighed with relief. This was terrain she knew. "My family is very traditional," she explained. "They disowned me when I decided to go to Europe alone. In their culture, it's unthinkable for an unmarried woman to go alone to a foreign country." Ricardo nodded understandingly. "That must have been very painful for you." "It was the right decision," Amina insisted. "Here I can be myself." These words would later take on a more important meaning than both could imagine. In the following days, Amina noticed that Ricardo began rummaging through her personal things. First, subtly, he rearranged her medications in the bathroom, searched in her handbag for forgotten candy, checked her laptop's history under the pretext of helping her with a technical problem. "Ricardo," she said one evening when she caught him going through her mail, "what are you doing?" He looked up, innocent as a child. "I'm just sorting our mail. As a married couple, we shouldn't have secrets from each other." "That's my private mail," said Amina with a firmer voice than she had intended. Ricardo's expression darkened. "Private mail? We're married, Amina. There's no more private mail. We're a family." The way he pronounced the word family made Amina shudder. It sounded less like a declaration of love than like a claim of ownership. On the weekend, they visited Ricardo's parents for the traditional Sunday dinner. Isabel had made a great effort to use Moroccan spices, although the result tasted more like a Portuguese dish with a hint of turmeric. Antonio told anecdotes from his time in the finance ministry, while Isabel bombarded Amina with questions about her future plans. "When will we have grandchildren?" she asked without preamble during dessert. Amina almost choked on her wine. We're taking our time," she stammered. "Time," repeated Isabel. "At your age, most women in Morocco are already mothers. Are there perhaps medical problems?" The question hit Amina like a blow. Ricardo noticed that she turned pale and protectively put his arm around her. "Mama, that's very personal." "But no," Isabel contradicted, waving her hand. "We're a family. If there are medical problems, we can recommend the best specialist in Lisbon." After dinner, Ricardo took his mother aside. Amina could hear their muffled voices from the kitchen but didn't understand everything. However, she clearly distinguished the words doctor, examination, and fertility. On the way home, Ricardo was unusually thoughtful. "My mother is right," he finally said. "You should perhaps see a doctor just to make sure everything is all right." Amina felt the walls closing in around her. "Everything is fine," she said quickly. "I don't need a doctor." "But if we want children?" "We've never talked about children," she interrupted him. Ricardo stopped abruptly at a red light and looked at her surprised. "Of course we want children. We're married. That's the next logical step." The light turned green, but Ricardo didn't drive on. The cars behind them honked, but he seemed not to notice. "Amina, don't you want children with me?" The question hung between them. Amina knew her answer was crucial. "Of course I want that," she lied. "I just thought we should establish ourselves as a couple first." Ricardo's face relaxed and he drove on. "You're right, we have time, but a medical examination would still be sensible." That night, Amina lay awake next to her sleeping husband and stared at the ceiling. The situation was escalating faster than she had expected. Ricardo's initial acceptance was transforming into possessiveness and control, and his family would never stop asking questions, digging, until they discovered the truth. She thought about Dr. Rodriguez, the missed appointments, the hormones she continued to take secretly. How long could she maintain this masquerade? And what would happen if Ricardo discovered the truth? In the darkness of their Lisbon bedroom, surrounded by the symbols of her new life, Amina felt more trapped than ever. The city that had once promised her freedom was beginning to feel like a golden cage. And Ricardo, the man she had married, was proving to be someone completely different than she had imagined. 2 months after the wedding, Ricardo's behavior had changed considerably. What had once been charming attention had transformed into obsessive surveillance. He controlled Amina's calendar, read her emails, and insisted on picking her up from work every evening. "I just want to make sure my beautiful wife gets home safely," he always said with his charming smile, but his eyes told a different story. On a rainy October afternoon, Ricardo came home earlier than expected. He found Amina in the bathroom, hastily hiding something in her toiletry bag. The sound of his steps on the parquet made her jump, and she turned around with a too-wide smile. "Ricardo, you're home early," she said, trying to hide her nervousness. "The client postponed the meeting," he replied, watching her attentively. "What are you doing?" "I'm just organizing my cosmetics," Amina stammered. "It was messy." Ricardo's lawyer instinct was alarmed. He noticed her trembling hands, the sweat drops on her forehead despite the cool autumn air. "Show me," he said with a tone that brooked no contradiction. "What?" "Show me what you put away." Amina hesitated a moment too long. Ricardo stepped closer and reached for her toiletry bag. In it, he discovered several small medication bottles whose labels were partially peeled off. "What is this?" he asked, holding one of the bottles up to the light. He could just make out the words estradiol and Dr. Rodriguez, endocrinology. Amina's world began to spin. "Those are vitamins," she said weakly. Ricardo was a lawyer. He knew lies and he recognized lies. "Estradiol isn't a vitamin, Amina. These are hormones." His voice became colder. "Why are you taking hormones?" Amina desperately searched for a plausible explanation. "The doctor prescribed them for irregularities." "My cycle?" "Which doctor?" Ricardo interrupted sharply. "You haven't been to a gynecologist since our wedding. I would have known." The trap was closing around Amina. It was before the wedding. Dr. Rodriguez? Ricardo opened his smartphone and entered the name. Doctor Helena Rodriguez, endocrinologist, specialized in hormone therapy and gender reassignment, he read aloud. The blood drained from his face. Gender reassignment. Amina felt her knees give way. "Ricardo, I can explain." But Ricardo was already examining the other bottles. "Cyproterone acetate," he murmured. "Spironolactone." He looked at her with a gaze that wavered between confusion and growing horror. "These are antiandrogens. These are medications for..." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Please, let me explain," Amina pleaded. Ricardo dropped the medications as if they were poisonous. "You are..." His voice broke. "You were..." "I'm a woman," said Amina with a firm voice, even though tears were streaming down her cheeks. "I was always a woman, only my body." "You are a man," Ricardo suddenly screamed, his voice echoing through the entire apartment. "You are a damn man." The neighbors could hear him through the thin walls, but Ricardo didn't care. He stared at Amina as if seeing her for the first time, And in a way, he was. "No," said Amina desperately. "I'm transgender. I'm a woman who was born in a male body. But I'm a woman, Ricardo. I was always a woman." Ricardo laughed bitterly. "A woman? You deceived me. You married me under false pretenses." He began pacing in the small apartment, his movements becoming increasingly aggressive. "My family, my career. What will people say? Ricardo, please listen to me. You married a woman. You slept with your wife. You made me a homosexual," he roared. "I married a man. I slept with a man." "That's not true," said Amina with a trembling voice. "You married your wife. You slept with your wife." But Ricardo was no longer listening. Everything was spinning in his head. The perfect marriage he had boasted about to his colleagues, the exotic beauty he had presented himself with in Lisbon society. Everything was a lie. Worse still, it was a lie that made him ridiculous. He grabbed his phone and began dialing a number. "Who are you calling?" asked Amina in panic. "The police," Ricardo replied coldly. "You deceived me, that's fraud. You married under false identity." Amina grabbed his arm. "Ricardo, I beg you. In Portugal, this is legal. I have all my papers in order. My gender was officially changed." Ricardo pushed her away so hard that she crashed against the bathroom wall. "Legal or not, you lied to me. You made a fool of me." He left the bathroom and began searching through Amina's things. He opened drawers, rummaged through her closet, dumped the contents of her handbag on the floor. "Where are they?" he roared. "Where are your real papers, your birth certificate? Ricardo, I beg you. What's your real name?" His eyes were full of rage. "What were you called before you threw yourself into this masquerade?" Amina remained silent. She had buried that name with the person she had never really been. Amin no longer existed, had never really existed. Ricardo found her laptop and opened it forcefully. "I'll find out," he murmured and searched through her emails. In her inbox, he found correspondence with Dr. Rodriguez, reports on hormone treatments, follow-up examinations. He found emails with a counseling center for transgender people in Casablanca, discussions about surgical procedures, psychological evaluations. "Amin," he read aloud from an old email address. "Your name is Amin Ben Ali." He looked at her triumphantly. "There we have it. You're Amin Ben Ali, a man from Casablanca who decided to play woman." "I'm not playing," said Amina quietly. "I'm Amina. I was always Amina." Ricardo closed the laptop and stood up. His face was a mask of disgust and contempt. "You disgust me," he said slowly. "You made me sleep with a man. You made me a..." He couldn't say the word, but Amina knew what he meant. In his head, her transgender identity made him a homosexual. And for a traditional Portuguese from a good family, that was the worst nightmare. "I want you to go," he said with deadly calm. "I want you to disappear from my apartment, from my life." "Ricardo, please, let's talk about this." "Talk?" he exploded again. "What do you want to talk about? About how you lied to me? About how you deceived me, that our marriage is a lie?" He grabbed her by the arm and dragged her to the door. "You're leaving now, immediately." "This is my apartment too," said Amina desperately. "I pay half the rent." Ricardo laughed bitterly. "This apartment belongs to my family. You pay me rent and now you're getting thrown out." He threw her handbag and coat at her. "Take your lying pills with you," he said, and hurled the medication bottles onto the hallway floor. The apartment door slammed shut behind Amina and she heard the click of the lock. She stood in the cold hallway of Lisbon, surrounded by broken medication bottles and the ruins of her life. Through the door, she could hear Ricardo on the phone. "Mama, I have to tell you something." "No, sit down. It's about Amina." Amina collected her medications from the floor and left the building. The autumn rain lashed her face as she wandered aimlessly through the streets of Chiado. Her phone rang incessantly. Ricardo's number appeared repeatedly on the display, but she didn't dare answer. Finally, the ringing stopped, but the messages came. "You sick liar," he wrote. "I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of fraud you are." Amina found refuge in a small cafe near Rocio and called Lara, her only real friend in Lisbon. "Amina, you sound terrible. What happened?" "He knows," Amina sobbed into the phone. "Ricardo knows, and he hates me." "He knows what?" "That I'm transgender. He found my medications. He knows I'm transgender. He threw me out." There was a long silence. "I'm coming to get you," Lara finally said. "Tell me where you are." But while Amina waited for Lara, Ricardo was already destroying her life. As a lawyer, he knew exactly how to harm someone without breaking the law, and he was determined to make Amina pay for her deception. Lara found Amina in the small cafe, huddled over an already cold cup of coffee. She had red eyes from crying and was shivering despite the warm cafe atmosphere. Lara, a determined woman in her early 30s with short blonde hair and a direct manner, immediately sat down next to her. "Tell me everything," said Lara, taking Amina's hands in hers. Amina described the events of the afternoon, the discovery of the medications, Ricardo's explosive reaction. Lara listened without judgment. Her experience as an openly gay woman in Lisbon had taught her that identity could be complex. "You're coming to my place tonight," said Lara decisively. "We'll find a solution." But Ricardo was already working on his own solution. As a successful lawyer in a prestigious firm, he had access to information and influence that he now used unscrupulously. His first call was to his father Antonio. "Papa, I need a favor," said Ricardo with a controlled voice, the same one he used in court. "It's about Amina. I've discovered a serious deception." Antonio, who still had contacts in the Interior Ministry, listened silently as Ricardo told him about the revelation about his wife. He didn't present her as a transgender woman, but as a fraud who had married under false identity. "I need information about her work permit," said Ricardo, "and about her original documents from Morocco. If she lied during her gender change, all these documents could be invalid." In the following days, Ricardo's revenge unfolded with the precision of a military operation. He used his professional contacts to contact Amina's employer. As a partner of an important law firm, his company maintained business relationships with the fintech startup where Amina worked. On Monday morning, Amina was called to her boss's office. Miguel Santos, a nervous man in his mid-50s, couldn't look her in the eye. "Amina, I'm sorry, but we have to end our collaboration," he said, playing with his pen. "Why?" asked Amina, shocked. "I've always done excellent work. There are problems with your papers, your work permit. We can't afford trouble with the justice system." Amina immediately knew who was behind it. "This is Ricardo's work, isn't it?" Miguel remained silent, but his facial expression revealed the truth. "I can offer you a decent severance," he murmured, "but you have to leave today." Without income and housing, Amina was dependent on Lara. She slept on the couch of her small apartment in Príncipe Real and desperately searched for a new job. But everywhere she applied, negative information about her seemed to already be circulating. Ricardo's next step was more subtle but equally destructive. He organized a dinner with his closest friends from the legal world and told them his version of the story. He didn't reveal the truth about Amina's transgender identity to them, as this would have led to discussions about tolerance and human rights. Instead, he painted the picture of a calculating and fraudulent woman. "She systematically deceived me," he explained over a glass of Vinho Verde in his favorite restaurant in Alfama. "False papers invented past. She's not the person she pretended to be. I have reason to believe she's wanted in Morocco for fraud." The story spread quickly in Lisbon's upper circles. Amina, who had once been admired for her exotic beauty, was now portrayed as a dangerous fraud. 2 weeks after the discovery, Amina received a call from the Policia de Segurança Pública. She was to report for questioning regarding her residence permit. Lara accompanied her to the appointment. Commissioner João Pereira, a corpulent man with grey hair, received her in his Spartan office. "Senora Benali," he said, emphasizing the name strangely. "There have been irregularities with your papers." "What kind of irregularities?" asked Amina, although she suspected the answer. "Your husband has filed a complaint. He claims you married him under false pretenses." Lara intervened. "That's ridiculous. Amina's papers are completely in order. Her gender was legally changed." Pereira leafed through a file. "It says here that the original birth certificate is in the name of Amin Benali, male." "That's correct," replied Amina calmly. "I'm a transgender woman. I legally changed my gender both in Morocco and in Portugal." "But you didn't inform your husband about this past?" The question was a trap. Amina felt it, but she had no choice. "No," she replied quietly. "I didn't tell him." Pereira took notes. "That could be considered fraud, marriage under false pretenses." "That's absurd," protested Lara. "Amina is legally a woman. No law requires her to disclose her medical history." But Pereira seemed to have already made his decision. "We'll have to review your residence permit. In the meantime, you're not allowed to leave Portugal." As they left the police station, Amina was devastated. "He's destroying my life," she said to Lara. "Systematically. Lara nodded. That's his plan. He wants to annihilate you. Ricardo's campaign intensified. He had found out where Amina was now living and began stalking her. He appeared in cafes she visited, followed her to job interviews, and made sure she never felt safe. One evening, as Amina returned from an unsuccessful job interview, Ricardo was waiting outside Lara's building. He was leaning against his black BMW and smoking, unusual behavior for him. "Good evening, Amin," he said with a cold smile. Amina stopped, her hand clenched around the door key. "What do you want, Ricardo?" "I want you to disappear from my life forever." He came closer, and Amina smelled alcohol on his breath. "You made a fool of me," he said, grabbing her arm. His fingers dug painfully into her flesh. "My whole family now knows who you are." "I'm your wife," said Amina quietly. Ricardo laughed bitterly. "You're not a woman. You'll never be a woman. You're a man in a dress who tried to deceive an honest Portuguese." He pressed harder, and Amina tried to free herself. "You're hurting me." "Good," he hissed. "You hurt me too. You violated my honor, dishonored my family." Passers-by approached, but in Lisbon, no one cared about an apparently private dispute between a well-dressed couple. "Ricardo, let me go," said Amina louder, but he ignored her. "Do you know what's ironic?" he whispered in her ear. "I might have even accepted you if you had been honest, but you lied, you used me." He pushed her back so hard that she stumbled against the entrance door. "Leave Lisbon," he said coldly, "or I'll make your life here hell." He got into his BMW and drove away, leaving Amina trembling in front of the door. Lara found her huddled and crying. "He was here," said Amina. "He threatened me." "We're going to the police," said Lara determinedly, but Amina shook her head. "They won't believe me. He's a respected lawyer. I'm a transgender woman without a home and without work. Who will they believe?" Lara knew Amina was right. The Portuguese system, however progressive it might be theoretically, could be very traditional in practice, especially when it came to someone like Ricardo, who had all the necessary connections. In the following days, the situation worsened further. Ricardo's law firm initiated a civil lawsuit against Amina for fraud and emotional damages. He demanded the annulment of their marriage and compensation. At the same time, he intensified his personal persecution. He followed her, secretly photographed her, and collected evidence for his narrative of the fraudulent foreigner. Amina felt like a hunted animal. Every outing became torture. She lost weight, couldn't sleep anymore, and her mental health deteriorated rapidly. "You have to fight back," urged Lara. "This is harassment, this is persecution." But Amina had already given up. "He's winning," she said quietly. "He has all the power, all the connections. I'm nothing." What Lara didn't know was that Ricardo's obsession had taken on dangerous proportions. His colleagues noticed changes in his behavior. He drank more, was more aggressive, constantly spoke of his humiliation. His mother Isabel was worried. "Ricardo, you have to forget this woman and move on," she advised him. But Ricardo couldn't let go. In his head, Amina wasn't just an ex-wife, but the symbol of everything that threatened his well-ordered world. And he was determined to eliminate this threat, whatever it cost. 3 weeks after the first attack on the Tagus, Ricardo's obsession had turned into complete paranoia. He was hiding in cheap hotels on the outskirts of Lisbon, his once well-groomed appearance completely disheveled. His beard was unkempt, his clothes dirty, his eyes sunken. But his fixation on Amina was stronger than ever. With a cheap mobile phone, he obsessively followed the media coverage. In his distorted perception, he saw himself as the real victim, the deceived husband, whom a calculating fraud had driven to ruin. "You understand it," he murmured in his shabby hotel room, reading online comments. "You understand what she did to me." Amina had been discharged from Hospital de Santa Maria after a week. The police had offered personal protection, but their resources were limited. "We can't station officers around the clock," Commissioner Pereira had explained. "But we'll conduct regular checks." Lara had taken unpaid leave and turned her small apartment in Príncipe Real into a fortress. New locks, a surveillance camera, emergency plans, but the psychological pressure was enormous. "I feel like I'm in prison," said Amina one evening, looking through the darkened windows. "Better in prison than dead," replied Lara. But her own nerves were frayed. The investigation progressed slowly. Ricardo's law firm cooperated reluctantly. His family remained silent, his friends claimed ignorance. Rumors circulated about an escape abroad. On the grey December afternoon of December 15th, Ricardo made his final decision. He would finish what he had started. He followed Amina and Lara to a supermarket in Príncipe Real. The streets were full of Christmas shoppers. Ricardo wore a baseball cap and a thick winter coat that concealed his changed appearance. He waited patiently until they left the store. When they entered a quieter side street, he followed them with quiet steps. His heartbeat hammered in his ears. "Amina," he suddenly called. They turned around and Lara screamed when she recognized him. Ricardo looked terrible, unkempt with a wild look like an animal that had been hunted too long. "Ricardo," said Amina, instinctively positioning herself behind Lara. "Leave us alone." "Alone?" he mocked, his voice brittle with suppressed rage. "You destroyed my life, ruined my career, shamed my family, and you want me to leave you alone?" Lara reached for her phone to call the police, but Ricardo was faster. He lunged at her, tore the device from her hand and hurled it onto the pavement where it shattered into 1,000 pieces. "This is between me and my wife," he said, spitting the word like a curse. Saliva gathered at the corners of his mouth. "I'm no longer your wife," said Amina with a firm voice. "The marriage was annulled." "Annulled," Ricardo repeated bitterly. "Yes, because you're a fraud, a liar, a man in a dress." Passers-by noticed the confrontation and stopped at a safe distance, but no one dared to intervene. Ricardo pulled out the same knife he had used at the Tagus. The blade gleamed in the weak winter light. "This time no one will stop me," he said with a calm that was more frightening than any scream. "This time I finish what I started." "Ricardo, please," pleaded Amina. "It doesn't have to end this way." "Yes," he said, taking a step closer. "It has to end this way. You made my life hell. Now it's time for justice." Lara bravely positioned herself between them. "You'll have to go over my dead body," she said with a trembling but determined voice. Ricardo smiled coldly. "If necessary." At this moment, Amina realized there was no going back. Ricardo's obsession had completely consumed him. He was no longer the charming lawyer she had married, but a broken man driven by hatred and madness. Time seemed to stand still. 3 people faced each other in a quiet Lisbon side street, one fighting for her life, one defending it, and one determined to end it. "If I can't have you," whispered Ricardo with a coldness that made Amina shudder to her core, "then no one should have you." He raised the knife and lunged forward. Lara screamed. Amina ducked. And in the snowy street of Príncipe Real, a story about love, betrayal, and obsession reached its bloody climax. What happened then would change the lives of everyone involved forever and raise a question that had no easy answer. How far can a person go when they feel betrayed? What happened then went quickly. Ricardo lunged at Amina with the blade, but Lara threw herself in between. The knife only scratched her winter coat. Amina screamed and threw herself at Ricardo. They fought on the frozen pavement. A brave passerby named Pedro intervened and grabbed Ricardo from behind. In the struggle, the knife fell clattering to the ground. Ricardo, held and surrounded, recognized his defeat. Sirens sounded in the distance. His face contorted into a mask of rage and despair. "You'll never be free," he hissed to Amina. "This isn't over." The police sirens came closer. Ricardo knew he only had seconds left. "If I can't have you," he said with terrifying calm, "then no one should have you." He reached for a glass shard from the broken phone and brought it to his throat. "Ricardo, no!" screamed Amina. But it was too late. He drew the shard across his throat. Blood sprayed onto the snowy sidewalk. He collapsed, his eyes fixed on Amina as life drained from him. The police arrived seconds later and found a dying man and a traumatized woman kneeling over his body, sobbing, not out of love, but out of horror. Commissioner Pereira shook his head in disbelief. He judged himself. Justice would never be complete. Ricardo had escaped his punishment through death. In the following weeks, the Portuguese media discussed the case extensively. Public opinion remained divided. Conservative press portrayed Ricardo as a tragic man driven to madness by betrayal. Progressive media saw him as a violent husband. Love, Lies and Violence, The Tragedy of Chiado, headlined the Expresso. For many, the case became a symbol of the complexity of identity in modern Portugal. Ricardo's family tried to hold Amina responsible for his death. She drove him to suicide, claimed his mother Isabel. But the evidence told a different story. The prosecutor's office dropped the case against Amina. Dr. Helena Rodriguez helped Amina resume her hormone treatment. Trauma can affect therapy, but will stabilize you. It was a long healing process. Lara remained unwaveringly at Amina's side. Their friendship had deepened through the shared danger they had lived through. "You risked your life for me," said Amina. "Why?" "Because you're worth it," replied Lara simply. 3 months after Ricardo's death, Amina received a new unrestricted residence permit. She found work at a technology company that specialized in diversity. "Your perspective is valuable to our team," said the HR manager. Slowly, she began to rebuild her life. She moved with Lara to a new apartment in Alcantara, far from the memories of Chiado. She started therapy. "You survived," said her therapist. "That's already a victory." But the scars remained. Amina still woke up at night, haunted by Ricardo's hate-filled eyes. A year later, Amina and Lara married in a small ceremony on the beach in Cascais. "This time it's real love," said Amina with tears in her eyes. "No secrets, no lies." The Portuguese LGBT community celebrated the wedding as a symbol of hope. "Love conquers hate," wrote the magazine Corpus. But justice remained incomplete. Ricardo had never stood trial. His systematic persecution had died with him. There was no conviction, no official recognition of his crimes. "Do you think justice was done?" asked Lara one evening. Amina thought for a long time. "He's dead, and I'm alive. Sometimes survival itself is the greatest form of justice." The story became a precedent case in Portugal. New laws to protect transgender people were discussed, training for police officers was introduced, counseling centers were strengthened. Amina began speaking publicly about her experiences. "No one should have to hide who they really are," she said at a conference in Lisbon. "But no one should have to pay with their life for their identity." Today, 2 years later, Amina lives a quiet life with Lara in their apartment overlooking the Tagus. She works successfully in the tech industry and advocates for transgender rights. The physical scars have healed, the emotional ones are slowly fading. Sometimes she thinks of Ricardo, not with hatred, but with sadness about what could have been. "He wasn't always a monster," she says then. "Hatred destroyed him, not me." Her story became a memorial that love can never be achieved through violence, that identity must be respected, and that sometimes the greatest courage lies in simply surviving. In the streets of Lisbon, life goes on. But Amina's story still echoes, a reminder that behind every crime there are people, and that true justice means not only punishment but also healing and hope.